Disaster. A disaster is a sudden calamitous event that seriously disrupts the functioning of a community or society and causes human, material, and economic or environmental losses that exceed the community or society's ability to cope using its own resources, though often caused by nature. Disaster can have human origins. Types of disaster. Disaster can be classified as natural disaster and human-made disaster. Natural disaster. A natural disaster is a major adverse event resulting from natural processes of the earth. Some major natural disasters in the Philippines: earthquake, tsunami, volcanic eruption, typhoon, storm surge, and flood. Man-made disaster. Man-made disasters have an element of human intent, negligence, or error involving a failure of a man-made system as opposed to natural disaster resulting from natural hazards. Some examples of man-made disasters: crime, arson, civil disorder, terrorism, war, and biological chemical threat. Earthquake, the result of sudden release of stored energy in the Earth's crust that create seismic waves at the Earth's surface. Earthquakes may manifest themselves by a shaking or displacement of the ground. Sometimes they cause tsunamis, which may lead to loss of life and destruction of property. Fault, a fracture of huge rocks caused by the earth movement or tectonic forces. Trench is an excavation in the ground caused by man's digging, river erosion, earth movement, and other environmental factors. Intensity. The severity of earthquake shaking is assessed using a descriptive scale, the modified Mercalli intensity scale. Magnitude. Earthquake size is a quantitative measure of the size of the earthquake at its source. The scale measurement, the amount of seismic energy released by an earthquake. What to do before an earthquake? Ready the first aid kit. Learn the earthquake plan at your school or workplace. Learn how to turn off the gas and electricity. Don't put heavy object on higher place. What to do during an earthquake? Stay calm. Stay away from a building or any object that may fall during an earthquake. Do the duck cover and hold. What to do after an earthquake? Check yourself and others for injuries. Provide first aid for anyone who needs it. Stay away from damaged areas. Stay out of damaged buildings. Expect aftershock. Tsunami. A tsunami is a series of waves in a water body caused by the displacement of a large volume of water, generally in an ocean or large lake. Earthquakes, volcanic eruption, and other underwater explosions above or below water all have the potential to generate a tsunami. Prepare now. If you live near or regularly visit coastal area, learn about the risk of tsunami in the area. Some at-risk communities have maps with evacuation zone and routes. Pick shelters 100 feet or more above sea level, or at least 1 mile inland. Sign up for your community's warning system, the Emergency Alert System (EAS) and National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration (NOAA). Weather radio also provide emergency alerts. Be safe after. Stay away from damaged buildings, roads, and bridges. It might be fall. Save your phone call for emergencies. Volcanic eruption. A volcanic eruption occurs when hot material from the Earth's interior are thrown out of a volcano. Lava rocks, dust, and gas compounds are some of these ejecta. Some eruptions are terrible explosions that throw out huge amounts of rock and volcanic ash and can kill many people. What to do during a volcanic threatens? Prepare now. Know your area's risk from volcanic eruption. Listen for emergency information and alerts. Avoid areas downstream of the eruption. Follow evacuation or shelter orders. Do not drive in heavy ashfall. Survive during. Listen for emergency information and alerts. Follow evacuation orders from local authorities. Evacuate early. Be safe after. Limit your time outdoors and use a dust mask or cloth mask as a last resort. Take temporary shelter from volcanic ash where you are.
This is a typhoon, a mature tropical cyclone that develops between 180 degrees and 100 degrees east in northern hemisphere. This region is referred to as the Northwestern Pacific Basin and is the most active tropical cyclone basin on Earth, accounting for almost one-third of the world's annual tropical cyclones. What to do during public storm signal number 1? Here's the number 1. Listen to your radio for more information about weather disturbance. Number 2. Check the ability of the house to withstand strong winds and strengthen it if necessary. Number 3. The people are advised to monitor the latest severe weather bulletin issued by Pag-asa every 6 hours. In the meantime, business may be carried out as usual except when flood occurs. What to do during public storm signal number 2? Number 1. Special attention should be given to the latest position, the direction and speed movement as the cyclone may intensity and move towards the locality. Number 2. The general public, especially people traveling by sea and air, are cautioned to avoid unnecessary risk. Number 3. Protect properties before signals are upgraded. Number 4. Board up windows or put storm shutters in place and securely fasten it. Stay at home. What to do during public storm signal number 3? Number 1. Keep your radio on and listen to the latest news about typhoon. Number 2. Everybody is advised to stay in safe and strong houses. Number 3. Evacuate from low-lying areas to higher grounds. Number 4. Stay away from coast and riverbanks. Number 5. Watch out for the passage of the eye of the typhoon. What to do during public storm signal number 4? Number 1. Stay in safe houses or evacuation centers. Number 2. All travels and outdoor activities should be canceled. Number 3. Keep listening to your radio to the latest news about the typhoon. What to do during public storm signal number 5? Number 1. Stay in safe houses or evacuation centers. Here in what are we reading? What is the storm surge? A storm surge, storm flood, tidal surge, or storm tide is a coastal flood or tsunami-like phenomenon or rising water commonly associated with low-pressure weather system, such as cyclones. It is measured as the rise in water level above the normal tidal level and does not include waves. Here's this example. Tropical cyclone storm surge. Here's the low tide, mean sea level, high tide. Storm surge. Storm surge has a big wave. What should I do if I am in a storm surge prone area? Number 1. During tropical cyclone events, always be on updates of the tropical cyclone advisories, alerts, or warnings which Pag-asa disseminates. Listen to the local news, TV, and radio. Number 2. Prepare at the earliest time your community has been identified as a storm surge prone area. Here's what to do. Identify the safest and quickest way to high safe ground. Know the location of concrete reinforced multi-story buildings designated by the local government for evacuation. Make arrangements with family or friends living in higher grounds with whom you can temporarily stay with during the storm surge. Prepare to evacuate as soon as your Municipal Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council or MDRRMC or your barangay officials advise you to do so. We have an example for this. The MDRRMC in our mobile phone, they're sending a warning if there's cyclone or earthquake. Here's for number 3. Should you instructed to evacuate, do not forget to do the following. Bring your emergency kit. Switch off the electrical power supply and gas tank. Lahat ng ito ay kailangan natin para kung sakaling magkaroon nga ng malakas na bagyo o malakas na malalim na pagbaha, kailangan natin dalhin tong mga nandito na nakalista. At ito, switch off the electrical power supply and gas tank para maiwasan yung may makuryente sa kasambahay natin or biglang may sumabog galing dito sa gas tank. Our next is flood. A flood is an overflow of water that submerges land that is usually dry. In the sense of flowing water, the word may also be applied to the inflow of the tide. Floods are an area of study of the discipline hydrology and are of significant concern in agriculture, civil engineering, and public health. Ito yung malimit na nararanasan natin dito sa Pilipinas. Ito yung malalaking pagbaha dito sa Kamaynilaan kahit sa mga probinsya. Ito yung mga dapat natin gawin. Preparation for calamities, particularly flooding. Number 1, regularly monitor your radio and television for calamity news updates. Number 2, prepare for enough candles, rechargeable lamps, and flashlights for possible brownouts. Number 3, if you reside in an area near the river, waterways, or mountainsides, immediately evacuate to prevent flash floods and landslides. Dito sa number 3, malimit natin nababalitaan is yung sa Marikina River. Sila yung malimit na natataasan ng baha. Kaya sila palagi rin nakahanda para sa mga evacuation kasi palagi na rin silang nakakaranas ng ganitong mga pagbaha. Number 4, store enough food, water, and first aid kit. Number 5, prepare a list of emergency hotlines. Ito yung mga kailangan natin. Kasi kung matrap tayo, dapat meron tayong mga naka-imbak na pagkain, tubig, lalong-lalo na yung tubig. Tapos, yun nga, sa emergency hotlines, kailangan natin to para makontak natin yung nasa local government natin para humingi tayo ng tulong. Phases of disaster risk reduction and management. Mitigation. To prevent future emergencies and take steps to minimize their effects. The mitigation phase occurs before a disaster takes place. Here, an organization will take steps to protect people and property, while also decreasing risk and consequence from a given disaster situation. The organization's main goal is to reduce vulnerability to disaster impacts such as property damage, injuries, and loss of life. Some of the mitigation actions to reduce long-term vulnerabilities are local plans and regulation, structural projects, natural system protection, education programs, preparedness and response action. Dito sa local plans and regulations, ito yung may mga nag-iikot or minsan nagkakaroon sila ng pa-meeting sa isang gym or para i-meeting yung mga nasasakupan nila. Itong structural projects, ito yung malimit na evacuation centers. Ito yung dapat magawa nung kada barangay or local government para merong malipatan yung naapektuhan ng mga baha. Natural system protection. Pagtulong sa mga naapektuhan or mabilisang pag-aksyon para sa mga naapektuhan ng baha o ng bagyo. Ito, education's program. Ito ay parang katulad dito sa local plans and regulation. Education's programs. Ito rin yung malimit or dapat pinapaalam or ini-educate yung mga nasasakupan nila kung ano mga dapat gawin pag mayroong mga kalamidad. Ito, preparedness and response action. Ito yung mga nakahanda na or mabilisang pag-aksyon sa mga naapektuhan ng baha o bagyo. Preparedness, to take actions ahead of time, to be ready for an emergency. The preparedness phase also occurs before a disaster takes place. Here, an organization's attempts to understand how a disaster might affect overall productivity and bottom line. The organization will also provide appropriate education while putting preparedness measures into place. Preparedness includes implementation operation system of early warning, preparedness plans, emergency exercise, emergency communication system, public education and training. Alam no mga sasabak sa pagtulong or na sa mga local government natin katulad ng BFP, Bureau of Fire Protection. Sila yung malimit na nakikita natin tumutulong. Ito yung kanilang mga dapat para sa paghahanda. Ito yung mga dapat nilang mga kaalaman. Response: to protect people and property in the wake of an emergency, disaster, or crisis. The response phase occurs in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. Organizations must focus their attention on addressing immediate threats to people, property, and business. Occupant safety and well-being largely depends on its preparedness levels before disaster strikes. Disaster response includes assisting refugees with transport, give temporary shelter and food, establish semi-permanent settlement in camps, repairing infrastructures. Ito kaagad pag may mga ganitong mga pagbaha. Katulad ito, assisting refugees with transport. Sila yung may mga daladalang lifeboat or life jacket. Tapos pagka na salba na nila o nakuha na nila yung mga naapektuhan, meron silang maibibigay na temporary shelter at saka pagkain. Ito ay sa pamamagitan ng ating mga local government. Establish semi-permanent settlement in camps. Ito yung mga lalong parang sobrang naapektuhan na medyo tumatagal sa evacuation or dapat medyo may sarili silang matutuluyan pansamantala. Ito naman yung mga pagtulong sa mga naapektuhan o nasirang bahay ng mga nasalanta. Recovery: to rebuild after a disaster in an effort to return operations back to normal. The recovery phase takes place after a disaster. This phase is the restoration of an organization following any impacts from a disaster. By this time, the organization has achieved at least some degree of physical, environmental, economic, and social stability. Ito ay nakasaad sa Republic Act 10121. The Republic Act 10121 or the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010, an act strengthening the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management System, providing for the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Framework and institutionalizing the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Plan, appropriating funds thereof and for other purposes. The act shifted the policy environment and the way the country deals with disasters from mere response to preparedness. RA 10121 provides a comprehensive, all-hazard, multi-sectoral, interagency, and community-based approach to disaster risk management through the formulation of the National Disaster Risk Management Framework. National Service Reserve Corps. The National Service Reserve Corps, also referred to by the acronym NSRC, Filipino, Panlaang Hukbo ng Pambansang Paglilingkod, is a unit composed of graduates of the Civic Welfare Training Services, CWTS. The Literacy Training Service, LTS, components of the National Service Training Program, a civic education and defense preparedness program in the Philippines. Members of this corps may be tapped by the state of literacy and civic welfare activities. In 2010, the NSRC was mandated to be accredited and mobilized for the delivery of disaster risk reduction programs and activities. One of the mandates of the National Service Reserve Corps, NSRC, of the National Service Training Program, NSTP, as potential training organization for an auxiliary support to local DRRM. Initiatives is an innovative approach to DRR that fosters the agency of the youth and educational institutions, especially college and universities, in groups and as individual to work towards making lives safer and communities more resilient to disaster. Yun lang po. Salamat!